Awesome. Well, we still have a few folks then coming in. All right. Oh, and there's Justin. Awesome. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Hey, Justin.
Hi, how you doing? I'm trying to get my camera together. My apologies.
No worries. Oh, hello, Colleen from South Lake Tahoe. I love it up in Tahoe. I might need to talk to you later, Colleen. See if I can move over by you. Hello, everybody. As you're coming in, please put your name and your role or title in the chat so we can get an idea of who we have here today. I know some of our friends from CLS are in the room. We're not able to see faces though as the panelists, just so you guys know, if you're trying to wave at me or something, I don't see you. Oh, there we go, Justin. All right. Oh man, yeah, definitely gotta try to make it to Tahoe this summer. Hi, Monia. I know Ricky and Kathy checked in too. Thank you, Don. Yes, name and role and where you're logging in from. We're going to give folks a couple more minutes, but we do want to get started pretty promptly here because I know we have very limited time. But we are excited to be here with you all today. And I think this is going to be a great conversation. Let's see, we've got Julie, Jaslyn, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Kyla, Luann, Christine. Oh, nice. Special ed teacher, Hannah. Welcome, everybody. Okay. Jerry. Oh, Albuquerque. Hey there, Jerry. Ruth. Hi, Ruth. Okay. Did we? Oh, there we go. Hold on. All right, there we go. Okay. So why don't we get this party started? Welcome everybody. I'm glad you could make it. We are here with a couple really incredible folks. We're going to ask that you, throughout this training, put any questions that you might have, any comments in the chat. Our friend Dawn here is going to be helping to screen through some of those questions. But as we do have this conversation going, we do welcome you to ask some questions of our panelists so that we can just make the conversation that much more rich and be able to clarify as we go. We're also hoping to have some time at the end to also ask some questions. So feel free to jump in. And we're glad to have you all here today. So let me just share my screen real quick here. Get us all on the same page. Okay, so we are presenting today Educational Resilience, helping our youth heal from emotional disturbance caused by trauma. I am from Collaborative Learning Solutions. My name is Otzi Sanchez. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself in just a minute here. We're the ones hosting today, and we have a panel of a couple of really incredible folks. So I will also just move in so that we can jump into that and to have them introduce themselves. Collaborative Learning Solutions is a K-12 consulting company. We're currently based out of Temecula. We are moving to Phoenix, but we have consultants that work all the way up to Washington, down into California and Arizona. We've also done presentations in different places across the nation, but that's typically where we're at the most. I think we are at 13 years, if I'm not mistaken. that we've been serving the K-12 school districts and different educational agencies. So we've been doing this for a while, and we do kind of have a span of things that we do. One of those pieces, of course, is trauma and working with students and staff that are servicing students that have trauma. We're always trying to meet the needs of those kiddos that are in the margins. So you'll hear a little bit about that as well later on today. So let's start in introducing our speakers. We'll start with Justin Black.
Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. I hope all is well. My name is Justin Black, as mentioned. I'm from Detroit, Michigan, where it snows year round. So all you California people, I'm jealous. And even more jealous you moving to Phoenix. But my name is Justin Black. I'm an author of a book called Redefining Normal. It's called Redefining Normal: How Two Foster Kids Beat the Odds and Discover Healing, Happiness, and Love. My wife and I both have lived experience in care. And after we both graduated from college from Western Michigan, we decided to write a book together, largely about identifying generational trauma and working to create generational success. And fortunate to turn this book into an entire company where we do trainings, workshops, and presentations with universities or organizations to help them create an environment where that's through professional development, communication styles that contributes to generational success for themselves and those around them.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here, Justin. He has some incredible experience just even growing up through the foster system. So he's going to have a different perspective that's going to really make this an exciting conversation. So thanks again for being here. And Peter, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, Haku Haku. My name is Peter John Connor III. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist who serves as the mental health specialist here at Odyssey in Ventura County, a VCOE school.
Great, thank you. Peter is involved with one of our CLS programs. And actually, I think we're almost done with our work. He's going to be, their program is pretty successful at this point and is probably not going to need as much support and connection from us, which of course we're sad about, but it's really exciting for the program and for the kids that he services there. So thank you, Peter, for being here today. My name is Otzi Sanchez. My background is also as a marriage and family therapist, which I did different work within the community for many years. I think it was about 15 years before becoming a consultant for CLS. So this is my new gig that I'm doing full-time now. But I worked in a program very similar to Peter's in Moreno Valley, where I was also working with kids that have emotional disturbance. So I'm going to be asking some questions of our panelists today. I'll jump in here and there where I can. But let's get into what we're going to be doing today. So these are our outcomes for the day. We do want folks to be able to understand student behavior through the lens of trauma. Obviously, from the time of COVID, there has definitely been a shift or a change in behavior that we've seen from a number of our students. So a lot of times behavior is either misunderstood or just deemed as defiance. And we want to be able to give a perspective of how trauma can impact behavior. We also want to build some of those educator-student relationships. That has been, I believe, a huge contributor to how students react and behave is when there is a relationship with the person that they're working with. So we are going to speak a bit to that. We want to make sure you have a trauma-informed educational setting, looking specifically at some of those behaviors, and that there's a collaborative approach, that it's not just kind of silo on the teacher in the room and therefore, you know, everything that I say, but that we really are leaning on each other, both for support and also to be able to address the students' needs. So before we move forward, we want to do a little bit of connection. I'm going to ask folks to jump into the chat. Give us 1 or 2 words to describe your school year. It looks like we have quite a number of educators from some of the work that I've done. I know it's been kind of I've heard a lot of different words: chaotic, crazy, overwhelming. So just thinking about your own experience this school year, what are a couple words to describe your experience? Looks like so far we've got transitional, diverse. Yes, definitely. There has been a lot of change. Ooh, aggressive. Yikes. Yeah, it's been a tough one this year for some folks. So fast, but hugely successful. We definitely like to hear that one. Especially with the overwhelm, sometimes you do see a lot of progress. So it's really kind of nice to hear a bit about that. Great PBL year and excited. Unpredictable, challenging. Yeah. All right. Thank you folks for sharing. If there's other words, feel free to jump into the chat. Just kind of a nice quote that I wanted to start us off on. Understanding why a kid is challenging is the first and most important part of helping them. And at CLS, we always try to start with the why whenever we're doing any kind of trainings. So often we will go to, well, what do I do with this kid? How do I do that? And sometimes we really need to be able to ground ourselves in first, why are we trying to address this situation, right? I'm sure we all got into education for a number of different reasons. For the most part, I don't think I've ever heard any educator say that they got into education for the fame and the fortune. So what is the reason that we came into this kind of work, right? So I will ask our panelists in just a moment to share a bit about why they got into this work. I'm going to stop sharing here for a bit so we can see folks, but I'll start just quickly. For me, I've always had a passion for students and for the student experience. And I'm not exactly sure why, but for some reason, kids always made more sense to me than adults did. So it's just great being able to support students, especially the ones who may not have support at home. The ones that really look to school and educators in order to get that support. And that really is where my heart has always leaned, especially for those kiddos that have mental health issues. If they are hearing voices, seeing things, or the ones that have just so much trauma that it really impedes on their educations. So that's a bit about why I am here today. Let's start with maybe Peter. What brought you to this field? Why this field?
Well, I worked a lot for Indian Health Services for many years. And after working with the Native American community, I realized there was a lot of disparities. And oftentimes I would have to work with our community members in school setting. So the more involved I got in the school setting, the more I realized schools provide a wonderful infrastructure for the delivery of services. And there's a constant need for empathic people to be working with our youth. Our youth represent our future, so the more we invest in youth and help them get past the disparities they're encountering, the better our outcome is. So that's really where my passion is, especially working with youth that may have several challenges that they're facing. And then if there's any developmental delays or emotional disturbance, that makes it unique in the challenges they have to grapple with. So that's really where my heart goes to.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Peter. And what about you, Justin? I mean, I know you have some experiences yourself. So how did you end up here? Why did you decide to continue on in this work?
Yeah, I think sometimes when we figure out what we're doing in life, we don't always choose our pathway, but our pathway kind of chooses us. And as I remember being in college and really studying things such as community development. When I was in college, I actually wanted to be a sports journalist, and I wanted to get away from trauma and that entire world. But I feel like the more I dove deeper into my passion, what am I really passionate about? who can I have an impact on and where can I have the greatest impact? I feel like my life started leading me more toward, that 9-year-old boy that I once was in elementary school, that teenage kid that I was trying to figure out life in so many different stages of my life. And I really wanted to create a platform to support that kid. And I know that there are hundreds and thousands and maybe millions of kids like out there like that. So how can I serve the people that are serving them? How can I work on the systems that impact them, and how can I deliver a message that directly contributes to their life? And so through writing books, through workshops, whatever platform I need to utilize my message and voice to create a change and impact and invest my time, my resources into making that change I wanted to do. And so while I do see myself as an author, an entrepreneur, and speaker, I want to play multiple different roles in impacting communities and families.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And in the chat, it looks like Rebecca mentioned family and communal learning as part of that why. If other folks want to include your why in the chat, please feel free to. It definitely is the basis and grounds for the work that we do and also for the impact that we make. Justin mentioned a bit of really wanting to make that impact. And we see some of that impact when it comes to our students, right? Well, sometimes we see the impact of trauma as well, unfortunately. So the next question that I really want to get into is, what does that trauma look or sound like? Obviously, trauma can present itself in different ways. Sometimes we see it, sometimes we don't. So I'll start with Peter here, but what are some things that you look for when it comes to trauma? If you meet a new student and you're wondering, I wonder if this kid's story might have some trauma in it.
I think my mind will automatically go to either they're internalizing or externalizing,
Mm.
and it'll manifest differently. So the kids that maybe are oversharing, the youth that maybe don't have the proxemics where they're too close to other students. That's one spectrum, the ones that are yelling and getting into fights. And then there's the other side of the spectrum to the students that are very quiet, very withdrawn, they're tearful. Um, when they become overwhelmed, you kind of see that shut down and they just kind of freeze. So I think that's kind of like the range and the spectrum. Those are the things that I look for.
Mhm. Thank you, Peter. And I'm just gonna poke at you a little bit more on this one. What signs would you say that educators need to look for?
I think a lot of times students that have experienced trauma will repeat things
Hmm.
and they'll say something again and again. And sometimes as educators or people that are exposed to that, it might take us a few times to really comprehend and hear what they're saying. And to just pay attention to that. I would also just thinking the mental status exam, the
Hmm.
presentation of the student,
Mhm.
like has the student worn the same clothes, 2 or 3 days in a row? Um, little things like that you can kind of pick up on. And I know it's challenging when we're trying to mitigate behaviors and there's outbursts in other students, but just being aware that we're kind of doing that assessment and we're actually connecting with the students and getting to know them.
Right.
Uh, and sometimes students will verbalize, like, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to get to know anyone.
Mhm.
I don't need anybody. And that's a really good indicator that they've had maybe some breaks with attachment and had some challenges with being able to trust people and institutions and organizations. So just something to be mindful of.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And Justin, I saw you kind of nodding while Peter was talking. What did trauma look like for you, or what have you noticed in other kids, or what things should educators look for?
Yeah, I think Peter made a great point about, it's not always obvious. Sometimes there are just small nuggets there, you know, um, for me, seeing small things where, I wore the same outfit to school pretty much the entire school year, as a kid, and picking up on small things. I remember I messed up my shoes where we used to say your shoes are talking, and I had to wear those same shoes for the rest of the school year. There's not much I could do. And so, what are some small things you could do to make a huge difference? Connect them to community resources and things of that nature, and different opportunities that even maybe beyond your scope of work or something you're able to do. But just those small things, what small things, and you don't have to, uh, put them on the spot, a student on the spot as much, but you could just take them to the side and communicate and just ask like, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? And even suggesting some help and support. So I even see in the comments someone mentioning they haven't seen that one in a while around the shoes,
Yeah.
but it just those are just some small things, around clothing and the physical appearance and just people taking care of themselves. And so just asking students questions like, hey, how is everything going? And do you want this? Do you want that? And or at least, do you want, more support? And do you need help with, a new pair of shoes or, try to offer more opportunities just to connect. I
Mhm.
think is the biggest thing, and looking for those small nuggets to be able to create that engagement and interaction. And a lot of times, unfortunately, it has to be the physical appearance, and it can be shown in the behavior as well. Sometimes, as I know, for the most obvious one, kids being a class clown,
Mhm.
or so to speak. I'm not the biggest fan of the phrase, but um, the class clown, usually that's the student who has the most trauma or the most things that they've gone through and experiences, and so that they try to hide and bury with that behavior. And so making sure we don't, respond to that unhealthy behavior with another unhealthy response, but really uh, give a unique response with special attention and communication.
Absolutely. Yeah. So huge, just having that connection. And I appreciate that you brought up the humor part of it because that can very easily be a defense mechanism. And sometimes we'll see that as attention seeking behavior. And where is that attention seeking behavior stemming from? Is there a different need there? Another question for you, Justin. What questions would you have liked for folks to ask you? Or maybe there was somebody that did ask you a specific question that you really wanted to hear.
That's a great question. What question was asked for me that I really wanted to hear? It wasn't, I guess for me, it wasn't a question as much. I did like being included.
Mm,
I think naturally sometimes I would exclude myself or disqualify myself from certain things, feeling as if I didn't deserve it or wasn't worthy of certain things. And I would kind of automatically disqualify myself. But I think, sometimes we invite people in to do certain things and empower them in that way. And we don't even realize how empowering that is.
mhm,
If you are doing some extracurricular activities, or student has finished up with schoolwork in class early, can you like say, hey, how would you like to participate in this game or something like that? Just inviting them in to do something fun, do something cool, to make them feel a part of the group, and just opening up that invitation. And like I said, I naturally exclude myself and isolate myself, but including people in was huge. So not exactly a question, but an invitation, I would
mhm.
say. And always keeping your door open, not only just physically but even emotionally. So how can you keep your heart opening to welcome different students who seemingly naturally want to be disassociated a little bit? So I would say the invitation is huge.
Yeah, most definitely. Thank you. Thank you for that. It reminds me of the classroom that I worked in. It with a group of high schoolers between ages of 16 and 19. They all had trauma. They were all identified with having emotional disturbance, and that is what brought them to the classroom that I was working with them in. However, the majority of them had tended to be what Peter had identified earlier as internalizers, which means that they weren't the kids that were acting out. They weren't the ones that were throwing desks or, trying to fight everybody. they were the kids that would completely withdraw. So if you just saw them out sitting outside or something, you would never know that they had anything going on. They looked and acted quote unquote normal. So you really wouldn't be able to identify them as somebody that had trauma. And the way that often I had to connect with them was not necessarily through talking to them as I would a therapist, you know, hey, how are you doing today? And trying to engage them in talk therapy. A lot of them wouldn't. And a lot of them, it took me months to try to build any kind of connection. And one that I think about often, he everything that we tried to do with him, he would respond back with F you, F this, F everything. He did not want to engage. And the way that I was able to connect and just get that little narrow opening to be able to build a relationship with him was just by sitting next to him in our morning circles. Didn't ask him any questions. I didn't ask him to complete anything. I just absolutely no expectation, just would sit in proximity with him. And through that, slowly we started just like, I noticed him writing on a desk one day and I responded back to him on the desk, which we later erased. So don't think I was trying to damage school property. But then, you know, as we continue to write to each other, then I got us like these little like whiteboards and then we would write notes that way. And that's how I learned that he was incredibly sarcastic. And through that sarcasm was how I was able to develop that connection and relationship with him. But it took a lot of patience. So I appreciate, Justin, you mentioning that invitation, because there are different ways that you can invite kids in without having to physically or verbally even invite them in. Sometimes it really is just let me be a part of your world in whatever capacity they'll allow you to be. So that was just a little bit about in my experience. But Peter, I also wanted to loop you in on this. Ways that you've been able to connect with students or signs that folks should look for or questions or ways that you were able to connect.
Yeah, I think it's important to just pay attention to the type of I guess words the students use, kind of not necessarily slang. You don't want to try to sound like overly hip or cool, you know. What's your name? You're not going to be saying that. But at the same time, you know, there's one thing I'll do where I'm like, are you good? I'll do that. And the students know that's us non-verbally checking in. Because sometimes people don't want to use words. If the trauma is stored in the limbic system of the brain, it's a body memory, a body trauma. It's hard to access that.
Mhm.
So what's really cool is you can have this reciprocity where the students acknowledge your empathy and you are responding to them. And it's an invitation for them to then, you know, if they see maybe like you have a presentation or you have a report or something due and you're kind of just not your usual self, they might be like, hey, are you good?
Yeah.
And that's establishing that relationship and that connection. Because at the end of the day, we're both human.
Mhm.
And trauma really works to steal our humanity from us as educators and as therapists and as people that work with youth.
Mhm.
Our goal is to restore their humanity.
Absolutely. And Peter, can you talk a little bit more about body memory? Because I'm not sure that all folks are familiar
Yes,
with that.
yes. So body memory is basically how our body stores specific traumas.
Mhm.
A lot of times we just assume, as therapists, and I'm guilty of this too, and I have been, like, hey, let's talk about it.
Mm.
Well, let's just say the trauma happened when you were two, you know, and it was before you had a really good working vocabulary and had access to describe what occurred. Or let's just say, you know, maybe it was a car accident
Mm.
and you got bounced around and it activated your vestibular system, proprioception, these other systems in your brain and in your body. You may not be able to articulate what that experience was, but your body will remember that. So if you get jostled a certain way or, you know, moved a certain way, it activates that memory. So a lot of times people that have experienced physical trauma their body will store that.
Mhm.
And it starts this whole physiological reaction within the body. So you'll see the flinch, like, like, hey, touch them on the shoulder. You'll
Yeah.
see them.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying on that. And I worked with a couple of folks where talk therapy was helping, but there was still some of that physical body response, like just that startle response when certain, they were like tapped on the shoulder or you just different triggers. And I believe it was for one client I can think of, EMDR was what was most helpful because it is accessing both sides of the brain. So the part of the brain that is unable to speak did have another way to be able to process and get some of that out. Yeah, thank you. And Justin, pulling you into this part of the conversation and just thinking about what worked for you as a student going in through school, being in foster care. What did teachers, educators do that was helpful for you? And what did they do that maybe didn't work for you or didn't necessarily land right?
Well, one of the biggest things that jump out to me around, the famous words from educators, we always hear, I don't need to be here. I already have my degree. I think the carelessness for me was something that, always rubbed off on me and other students. The
Mhm.
idea that if you don't care, we don't care. But one of the things that I always saw that it was very impactful and helpful for me throughout my life is that when I saw that teachers cared for me, not only just for the entire class, but they specifically cared about me and my success. And so I remember slacking off in class or talking a lot or just really not giving the full effort or just playing around in class. And then the teacher will pull me to the side at the end of class and say, hey, Justin, I know you could do a lot better. I know you could work harder, or I know you can do more. And so what can be done to really help you out, or, just here's the level of expectation I have for you.
Mhm.
I think that's huge. And I was for me as a student, it was my goal to live up to the standards that was set for me by my teachers and educators,
Mhm.
especially since I didn't always have that positive reinforcement at home. And so I knew if I had someone to believe in me, then I had a standard to live up to. And so I didn't want to disappoint that teacher. And for those classes, those are actually the classes where I did the best because I had a teacher who showed that they cared, and I knew they cared, and I always wanted to work hard for them. So when there was an opportunity to talk to one of my friends next to me while they're teaching, I would maybe try to focus more on this teacher instead of talking to my friend. And I would more or less try to uh, invest in a relationship where someone cared about me and invest their time into me.
Mhm.
Because as students, in these classrooms, our greatest relationship is our friends, and not to say teachers can compete with friends at all. There can be best friends in the room, but they'll be. I feel as if they'll be more interested in a educator who has worked to develop a relationship. And while they may have friends in the room that they want to talk to and hang out with, that they may also feel as if the relationship that you've built is just as important to where that hour, 2 hours, give or take, that they have in your classroom, they really want to invest that time and energy into giving you their undivided attention. So I feel like that's something small that we can do is just that positive re-encouragement and relationship building. That's something small, but it can make a huge difference.
Oh, so true. Yes. I had, so in the classroom that I was in, we would do a morning check-in and later we started an afternoon check-in as well. And actually the first thing we did was move all the desks and chairs, and granted, we had a huge space and about 8 students that would show up regularly. So I did have a little bit more flexibility in all of this, but every morning it was a 5-finger check-in. Scale of 1 to 5, how are you checking in this morning? Once everybody kind of got the hang of that, then it was, why are you checking in at that number? And then finally, the last layer of that was, what do you need, or how can we as a class support you? And that was huge. Again, inviting students in, connecting with everybody, And we would have teachers, aides, every adult, every student doing this morning check-in in a circle, which allowed us to build some of that community, that connection in case, and whenever anybody was out, even if it was a suspension related absence, whenever they would come back, it was always welcome back. We missed you. And just trying to connect that energy of how valuable this person was that was missing for the day. So there wasn't, or we at least tried not to include any shame around whatever the situation was, especially with trauma. We don't know how that absence may have impacted the student. So always bringing them back was always a welcome. You are included, you are a part of our community, you're a valuable part of our community, and we want to make sure that you feel like you matter within that class. I did notice in the chat, I wanted to go back. Karen had a question around helping students who have body trauma. And Peter, you did respond with the somatic processing and bilateral stimulation and movements. Can you give an example of what that might look like, especially like within a classroom?
Be helpful if I unmuted, right?
Sometimes, yeah.
So 2 examples. A lot of times in the mixed martial arts groups that I'll lead or coach, we'll have veterans coming in. So they have PTSD, a whole myriad assortment of somatic memories. So one movement that we'll do, and you don't all have to stand up, but you bring your left hand down, right hand up, and then you clap. And then you make another circle, left hand down, right hand up. What that does is you're actually utilizing both hemispheres of the brain, because the opposite hemisphere is responsible for the other side of the body's movement. So left hemisphere, right side of the body. As it crosses the corpus callosum, it helps process a memory in the limbic brain, in the amygdala. If you're recalling the memory, that's especially helpful. This is something that we'll do before warm-ups, before competitions, and especially with veterans. Another thing that we'll do is, I call it the butterfly hug. So you can put your hands here, okay? And then you're going to gently tap your shoulders, okay? And then I call it box breathing. So you're going to breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds to trigger the vagus nerve. You're going to hold for 4 seconds. Exhale for 4. One of my tribal elders would say a very short prayer. They would say peace and strength. So they would breathe in deeply, peace, hold it in, and when they exhaled, it was strength. So combining that bilateral stimulation with a positive affirmation and a mindful saying, you're actually changing the physiology, of your body, triggering the vagus nerve, and that's slowing your heart rate. So that's helping students to process and be in their bodies in a positive way, especially if they're escalated. So I would try those, and then just as they get more comfortable hearing their story and understanding their body may store the trauma in different areas, but it's a limbic, so body trauma response when you get that uh-oh feeling in the gut of your stomach, like right in the pit, like that, oh, something bad's going to happen. That's that part of your body kicking it in. It's the limbic part.
Thank you for that. And for that exercise. I might need that one from time to time between meetings sometimes. But those are great. And there's other exercises as well that would incorporate some of that, but the ones that Peter offered are really great ones, because really you can do them in the middle of class, in the middle of the day. And I used to really like doing those kinds of things. I would do different, pull up YouTube and meditation videos, or have create kind of a routine for my students in practicing some of those things, because I was a therapist in this classroom, which is definitely it's something that's a little more unique to the programs that we do, is that there is a therapist in the room to be able to address different behaviors and struggles and crisis and all of that throughout the day. So it's kind of a special way to do it. But I was able to do some social skills groups. And so we would introduce different exercises like that for students to practice, to exercise. We'd encourage them to do it outside. And I don't know how much they actually did, but at least they had some exposure to it. So this is absolutely great. Rebecca also has a question in the chat regarding resources for nonverbal alternative ways to interact with students who can't articulate or don't respond to talk therapy style engagement. I have a few, I'm sure our panelists have a few as well. I used to do a lot of either writing or drawing with my students, or sometimes, speaking of bilateral movement, walking together so you're not face to face. Like sometimes that eye contact, I think, can be a little overwhelming. So even sometimes when because if you're walking, then you're not directly having to stare at each other. Sometimes that would help. With some of the male students that I worked with, we'd go out and shoot hoops while we were talking. Sometimes that would help as well, so that it wasn't so like confrontational and direct, and sometimes that would help with communication. We also do have a resource page that has kind of a lot around trauma and ways to support those students, which we will give at the end. So stick around for that. In the meantime, Peter or Justin, either one of you, do you have other things you want to offer for that nonverbal alternative ways to interact with students?
Yeah, I would love to share just quickly, Rebecca. That's a great question. And one of the things I start to learn being on this side of it, and as I start to grow and learn, is how important styles of communication are. And one of the things I found is that's helpful is love languages. And so
Oh,
love languages is that's typically used when I first heard of it, used in a romantic sense to see how me and my wife best communicate. But once uh her adoptive mom actually used it to with her kids in the house. They have 5 kids in the house, and so they used it to better understand their kids. And her mom would touch her son on the shoulder, and he really didn't like being touched and everything. And so everyone in the house took the love languages exam, and you start to see how the kids in the house actually want to be treated and communicated with. And so while that can be used in a romantic personal relationship, it'll also be used. There's like a professional love languages exam that students and professionals can use as well to see how each person likes to communicate. And so that's something that I started to utilize in different workshops now, today, in different sessions and interactions. And so understanding how each person communicates, also understand how you communicate, and being able to it's a lot as an educator to adjust to different students, variety of different students, ways of communicating. But especially in individual interactions, what is that student looking for? Are they looking for just quality time with the one-on-one? Or are they looking for words of affirmation? Are they looking for a slight tap on the back of encouragement, a gift? What are they really looking for? How are they looking to be affirmed? And sometimes I think we can affirm people the way we want to and think it's okay, but understanding how they communicate and how they want to be affirmed is huge. And so that's a great question. I think looking at the love languages could be huge.
yeah, and they do actually, I think they have the quiz that's adapted specifically for kids, I think. Because I think I actually used that as an intervention at one point in time. And definitely so helpful in just learning the kids, and sometimes I would just do even just general questionnaires. Who are you? What do you enjoy doing? What are you good at? And allowing the kids to just usually write that information so that I could keep it for my own records, just trying to get to know them. And a lot of kids that do tend to be more of those internalizers tend to communicate more through writing than they do through speaking. So that's definitely a great way to even just open the conversation. If you have something written that you can start with and kind of gain some traction in communication. Peter, any other thoughts, strategies?
I think one thing to consider too is the age of the
Mhm,
kiddo that you're working with and spending time with, and developmentally where they are. Because you figure like time and touch, usually that's a love language that younger children really cherish. And as you get older, there's more of the gift giving.
mhm.
One thing that's worked really, really amazingly well with, I would say, middle schoolers and high schoolers is music.
Oh, yeah.
If they don't have the words, I'm sure they're listening to someone who has the words they wish they could say or shares what they're feeling. And a lot of times just spending that time and, hey, what's your playlist look like?
Mm,
What are you vibing to? And have them share that song. And I like to pull the lyrics up so I can kind of just like, wow, that was powerful when, Juice World said this. Like, wow, like how did you like what does that mean to you?
mhm.
So you're joining them in their world, and you're getting exposed to cool music too. So it's a win-win.
Right. Most definitely. Oh man, time is just flying by. I have a note on here that I definitely wanted to get into, which is something we kind of briefly talked about yesterday in preparation for today's webinar. But the iceberg analogy, thinking about what we see in the presentation of a student versus what is going on. And Justin, I believe you brought that one up, so I wanted to get your take on that one before we move forward.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And one of the things that a lot of classrooms, environments, a lot of us on the front end are able to see the tip of the iceberg, and the tip of the iceberg consists of the actions, behaviors, even what students want you to see. And it's so easy for us to respond to the tip of the iceberg, to put students out of class, to just snap. And I've heard from teachers and different workshops, it's hard to de-escalate a situation. It's hard to what's the saying? I don't want to mess it up. You can't de-escalate a situation if you're escalated. There we go. And so it's so hard to respond, or to the tip of the iceberg. But how can we look even deeper when something is there's more to it than just what we see?
Mhm,
How can we build a personal relationship to where we can have a better understanding of what's underneath the tip of the iceberg? And what's underneath the tip of the iceberg a lot of times is family history, is the
mhm,
traumas. Those are the average childhood experiences that we know about. Is these different things that, kids and students don't really have language or the understanding to put, or the words to express. And I know it's hard as teachers and adults, professionals, but I'm hoping that we all can work to either get the skills and the ability to start to translate some of that behavior to have an appropriate response. So not only just to what's at the tip of the iceberg, but what's underneath deeper than that.
yeah, most definitely. And do you bring up a good point around our adults' self-awareness and well-being? If we are in an escalated state, how are we going to de-escalate our students, right? So Peter, actually, I wanted to ask you the importance of self-care and well-being for the adults in the room.
That is tremendously, tremendously important, because we're providing that stability to these youth who oftentimes come from a place of chaos.
Mm,
And we need to be so consistent that it might seem boring. They know what response they're going to get from us, not a reaction, an intentional, consistent response. What that also entails for us is we have to be aware of what our own triggers are.
mm,
I've had staff totally fine, and not that anyone should ever have, students push them, okay with that. But the moment a student spit,
mm,
that was a whole nother issue. And we all have those things that we can tolerate. And then that's when we're like, hey, I need support. I need to rely on my team. We need additional support.
mhm,
And that's why we have the teams that we do.
mhm.
We rely on them for support. And it's that sense of community that we're also modeling too.
Right.
our students need to know, like, hey, these are the grown-ups that are taking care of me, but they take care of each other. This is a safe environment.
Mhm. Yeah. And speaking of that, because we also did speak a little bit yesterday about the importance of collaboration,
Mhm.
and debriefing following a crisis. Could you speak a little more to that?
Yes. So once we're more aware of our own trauma histories and our triggers, then we know how things will impact us. And I'm so grateful that Justin did bring up the love languages,
Mhm.
because the converse of that is, if our love language is words of affirmation, and some student just called us everything under the sun, we're going to internalize that a lot differently versus a staff member where maybe it's gifts and, it's different. So being aware of how we interact, and like, hey, I noticed, Miss Teacher really had a strong reaction to that. Let me go check and make sure she's okay. Not
Right.
just as professionals, but people that spend 8 hours a day together, you know?
Mhm.
So that level of collaboration, and then the debrief, like,
Mhm.
are you good?
Yeah.
And trusting your team where you're like, no, I'm not good. Like,
Mhm.
I had a rough morning. My mom's in the hospital. Like, this was just too much.
Right.
And then that's where we offer that additional support.
Mhm. Yeah, and here at TLS, we call that the restorative conversations. When we have had some form of, somebody had a crisis, some blowout, somebody said something that was offensive or hurtful, or did something that was hurtful or offensive. And we always want to come back to that situation again, bringing that kid back into the community. You did something that harmed our community. What are some things that maybe we can do in order to improve that, or to kind of make amends for the harm that was done? And of course, sometimes that takes time, because oftentimes kids will make every excuse in the book why their behavior was justified. And sometimes we can model that as adults too, and say, you know what, my reaction wasn't the best. I'd like to apologize, or I'd really like to improve the relationships that I have with you all. I did want to come back to a question that we have in the chat from Karen. As teachers, how do we help our students who struggle with trauma in the classroom when the first reaction that they have when they start losing control of themselves is aggression? Um, Either one of you want to respond to that one? Let's see
I
who gets.
think this is something that we had kind of mentioned yesterday, and it's just fresh in my brain. Um, is having a proactive strategy versus a reactive.
Mhm.
Proactive strategy, and where I grew up, you kind of had to have your head on the swivel and see if there's a imminent danger coming your way. Um, so that way you can kind of prepare and you have a plan.
Mhm.
So if a student is easily escalated, you already know what the protocol is for de-escalating the student, providing an alternate location where they can go, having a preferred staff that they could meet with. And that's a tiered response to de-escalate them and provide that level of containment, because physical aggression means I'm out of control. I need to know that things are okay and to be contained in a safe, healthy way,
Mhm.
and to keep staff safe, and then everyone in the classroom, because we don't know the other students' traumas, and that can be a triggering experience. So proactive strategy versus reactive, like, okay, calm down, like, you're upset. If we see them getting off the bus and they kind of have a look on their face and maybe they're a little disheveled, that's when we start using those strategies.
Yeah. Yeah, I had one student come in, she was very upset. She immediately came in and started ripping up a notebook that belonged to another student. Luckily, he wasn't there. So I asked one of the other adults in the classroom to take the other students elsewhere. So we had a bit of space. Definitely knowing the fact that an audience was going to create more of a trigger was helpful. So as much as we know about our kids beforehand is definitely the best way to avoid the aggressive part. And of course, there's going to be times where we're just not going to see it coming. So we do need to be reactive in that case, but it is incredibly helpful when we do have a plan in place, or when we are able to debrief with that student afterwards and say, what would have been helpful? What are some things moving forward in the future that we might be able to prevent this from happening again? And sometimes they have some insight, sometimes I'll go, I don't know. And you work with them on it. What are some things that you enjoy doing? Music is helpful. You know, there's definitely, each person is going to be different. Even as adults, we're all different. So learning as much of that beforehand is definitely helpful, or after the fact, if you have had an aggressive situation. We are about 5 minutes from the end, and so I do want to honor everybody's time. I'm going to share screen again quickly here, just so our presenters can offer a bit of their own information in case you have, more questions that you'd like to ask. Follow up if you wanted to dive in a little bit deeper into some of this conversation. I know we kind of just hit on some pieces here and there. But Justin, would you like to tell us a little bit about what you have going on? I know you have some books out there. Oh, and Dawn has it in the chat for us as well.
Yeah, so first off, I just want to thank everybody for just your willingness to join tonight's call and have these conversations. I just so much appreciate just your willingness to be able to learn more and engage more. I think that's huge and that's amazing. For Redefining Normal, as mentioned, we are all about identifying generational trauma and working to create generational success. So all the books you see here on the screen, we've been fortunate to develop an entire curriculum. And so we've broken our memoir, the book you see in the top left blue corner with me and my wife. We've broken this down into presentations along with our companion guide, the one in the yellow, and then the bottom right corner, our planner. And so we work on personal development as it relates to the foundation of who we are, challenging this normalized trauma that we've accepted into our life, putting the new practices and habits that we've identified into ourselves into real life scenarios, and how we build relationships and how we move forward with creating our goals and day-to-day actions, and putting those goals that we set for ourselves into action on a day-to-day basis with to-do lists and things of that nature. So we do that with the planner. We're creating to-do lists, short-term, long-term goals, and this entire curriculum. We come together, work with professionals, work with students, and really try to create a vision for how us as a community can be successful. So that's what we're doing right now. We're redefining normal, traveling the country, doing this work, and just super blessed to do it.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here today. He has a lot more books too. This is just what I could fit in the screen. So please go to his website, check that out. There's some really incredible stuff on there. So thank you again, Justin, for being here. Peter, I have your emails, ways of contacting you. Anything you wanted to add here?
Just thank you all for attending. Justin, thank you so much just for your knowledge and everything that you brought. It's been eye-opening. Yeah, and then any questions, those are the contact info. But Justin, I'll definitely be reaching out to you.
We definitely got to stay in contact for
I'm
sure.
looking forward to it.
And again, Dawn put all of our contact information in the chat for you. This is mine. Feel free to reach out. We have also the info at CLS team in case you wanted to hear a little bit more about the programs that Peter and I were both working in. We're obviously open to helping you out however we can. And last but not least, I wanted to leave you guys with some resources so you can use that QR code. Dawn, if you're able, maybe you can get the link in the chat. I completely forgot to get that one out there beforehand, but the QR should work and it should take you to some trauma resources and a bunch of different live links you can use in order to support the work that you're doing in schools with students, sometimes even with family members. So again, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you so much to our panelists for taking the time and getting into this conversation. And if you'd like to stay on and ask a couple more questions, we'll be here for a few more minutes. But again, thank you everybody for being here, and we'll see you again later. Thanks, everybody. Okay, looks like Rebecca has a couple questions. What about procrastination as a symptom of anxiety, etc.? Ooh, I think I have that.
I think kind of what Justin was speaking to with the goal setting, a lot of times the the thought of having to do this huge task, and it may not even be a huge thing, becomes overwhelming. And we know anxiety has this tendency to keep us looking toward the future, but with disastrous consequences. So just breaking it down to the smallest step possible and creating those micro goals so you can check it off your list as you do them. And that way you can review the progress you've made. And it's like, all right, you get that dopamine hit, like, oh man, I did it. I got the envelope to send out the letter or to this, college or whatever it may be. Um, and celebrating that. And
Yeah.
then obviously, the planners and I'm sure Justin can speak more to that for sure.
That's right, Justin's got a planner.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Peter. Every time I'm overwhelmed or I procrastinate is because it's this huge task, and my wife's dad coined a phrase called productive procrastinator, where you're doing task, but it's not the main task that you should be doing. You're doing everything else to avoid the main thing you should be doing. I notice I do that a lot. And
Yeah.
so, as you mentioned, breaking the task down into small bits so it doesn't seem so big and overwhelming. If you break a boulder down just piece by piece, maybe you can start to feel as if you made some progress. And so, I love that perspective of it and just breaking it down into small pieces. And actually, if you need to maybe do some hand holding, these are your teacher, these are students. You do some hand holding to lead them into an assignment or a task that eventually gets the ball rolling, and then they take it from there. I think that'd be huge as well.
Yeah. I created a template that I can send you if you want it. But it had like the students' long-term goals in different areas. So it was like their academic goal, there was an emotional or personal goal, and then there was like a career readiness goal or something like that. And then from the long-term goal, I would help them to devise a goal for the week in one of those areas that they wanted to address. So it wasn't like they were trying to tackle each area in those goals, but there was like, for this week, what is the one that you want to make some progress on? And a lot of times kids don't have the know-how to consider what is the goal for the week, considering this bigger long-term goal. So I would help them do that, and then we would talk about what is what is needed and what support can I give you. Thank you, Justin. So that kind of helped them in order to see, okay, this is something small that I can do. And then this is the support that, so-and-so can give me. Maybe they needed some accountability. Maybe they needed somebody to, like Justin said, walk them through it. But sometimes that was helpful as well, just to get a little more clarity around what the goal actually is and what are some of those smaller steps to get there. Okay. So hopefully, Rebecca, we answered your question. Again, if folks have additional questions they want to ask or specific situations that they would like some feedback on, you have our contact information. Feel free to reach out to us. And again, thank you everybody that stuck around. Have a great day.